Before we read the second half of Acts chapter 17, a quick reminder of where we have been in the first half of Acts chapter 17. In the first half of Acts chapter 17, we joined Paul and his friends Silas and others in the city of Thessalonica. Remember, that's where they were staying at Jason's house. And when the angry mob of opposition tried to hunt Paul down, they couldn't find him. And they took Jason instead. We talked about the case of mistaken identity, right? Standing in place of, we stand in place of Jesus, and people recognize him in us, just as the people of Thessalonica saw Paul in Jason. So Paul escapes Thessalonica and he goes to the neighboring town of Berea and he begins to teach there. And these people who couldn't find him in Thessalonica hear that he's in Berea, and so they head there too to try and find him. And Paul escapes before they can get him. And Paul heads down to the city of Athens. That's where we left him. He left the rest of his crew up there in Berea yet, and he went down to wait for them in Athens. And while he's in the bigger city of Athens, he doesn't just hide there, afraid that this mob will come find him. No, he does what he always does. He teaches about Jesus. So before we read about that in the second half of Acts 17, know a little bit about the city of Athens. Athens is a major city. It's a center of thinking and philosophy. There's a leading university in the world there, and these philosophers and thinkers, they spend time exploring the meaning of life, the purpose of living, and especially how their many gods impact their lives, how to keep their gods happy, what you need to do to live the good life by pleasing these many gods. Okay, so that's the context of the city of Athens. And while Paul is there, he sees a unique opportunity to talk about God. Pick it up at verse 16 of Acts 17 with me. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who happened to be there. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with him. So these are the professional philosophers, right? Some of them asked, "What is this babbler trying to say?" Others remarked, "He seems to be advocating foreign gods." They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Then they took him and brought him to a meeting in the Areopagus, where they said to him, so now he's with all the thinkers and the philosophers, and they said to him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we would like to know what they mean." All the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious, for as I walk around and look carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship. And this is what I'm going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him. though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. When they heard about the resurrection from the dead, some of them sneered, but others said, "We want to hear you again on this subject." At that, Paul left the council. Some of the people became followers of Paul and believed. Among them was Diocenes, a member of the Areopagus, also a woman named Damaris, and a number of others. When I was younger, I had the privilege of getting to know my great-grandma, my bisabuela, right? Her last name was Venosenberg, and since that was a lot to say for a young child, we all called her Grandma Van. We skipped the Venostenberg and just called her Grandma Van. She lived to be about 94, was healthy and young until she tripped and broke her hip. I remember her as, I told you I'm a Detroit Tigers baseball fan. I learned it from her. She was a huge Detroit Tigers baseball fan. I remember her great big smile. She always had some candy in her purse. She was fun. But I never got to know my great-grandpa Van, her husband, my bisabuelo, right? He died just before I was born. I've seen him in pictures. I've heard stories about him. He was fun too, I heard, and he just had a love of life. But I never got to know him myself. The stories that I hear and the pictures that I see will still leave him as kind of an unknown grandpa to me, right? A bit of a mystery. Here in Acts 17, Paul discovers that the people of Athens have an altar to an unknown God. A God they've never had a chance to meet. A God they don't really know for themselves. Right? He walks around the city and he sees that the city is full of altars and idols, right? Because they're philosophers. They're trying to figure out how to satisfy all these foreign gods. But in their thinking process, they wonder and they worry that they might offend a God that they don't even know about. Right? And this God they don't know about, he might be kind, but he might be mean. He might be strong, but he might be weak. He might love people or he might hate people. They don't know. And so they dedicate an altar, a place of worship, to this unknown God, where they offer sacrifices to the God they don't know, just to be safe, just in case he's mean. Well, Paul sees that altar, and he sees an opportunity to make the true God known to them. Because the true God, the God we know, is a God who can be known. Right? Like I can know my great-grandpa, even though I've never met him. In the same way, there are ways that we can know God, Paul says here in Acts 17, even if we've never met him face to face. Our God is not a distant, mysterious, secret God who's trying to hide from us. No, our God is leaving evidence of himself all over the place. He's reaching out to us, showing himself to us, introducing himself to us. So Paul says to these philosophers of Athens who are trying to figure out life, you want to know this unknown God? You want to know the true God? Let me introduce him to you. And he starts He starts with pictures. Right? Pictures of God we see in creation. That's what he's talking about in verses 24 and 25. Like I can know my great grandpa who I never met through pictures that I see. So we can know God through the pictures he leaves for us to see. Paul says, look around at this creation and you can find evidence that God exists. Right? The simple fact that creation exists against all unbelievable odds and that it continues to exist reveals that there's a God who created it and maintains it. Right? It is easier to believe in a God who creates and maintains this creation than to believe that it all came to be by chance. Think about which one is the greater mystery. Creation, Paul says, is shouting about the presence of God. Right? So that's what Psalm 19 tells us. Just the first 4 verses. Let me read those for you. David writes, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge." They have no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out to the ends of the earth, their words to the end of the world. Creation is consistently, nonstop, night and day, giving us a picture, helping us to know who God is. And look at these pictures, and you can not only know that he exists, but you can know who he is. You can know his character. Look at the colors of the rainbow or the splendor of a sunset. And you can see he's a God who loves beauty. He's an artist. Look at the variety of all the animals in the world, right from the smallest insect buzzing in your ear, to the largest whale swimming in the oceans, to flightless birds and flying fish, to the hippopotamus that could easily crush you, or to your dog who just wants to sit on your lap. And you will see he's a God who's thrilled with creativity and invention. Go to the coast up north and look at the power of the crashing ocean waves, and you'll see that he's a God of power. Look at all the order in creation that science shows us, and see God's engineering, his planning, his design. Look at the painful consequences of bad decisions in our lives, and you'll see that he's a God of justice. But at the same time, look at all the undeserved blessings that are filling our lives right now, and you will see he is a God of immense mercy and grace. Now, all creation boldly declares the presence and the person of God. And that includes you. That includes me. It includes every single person that you see, because we are a part of God's creativity. In fact, we're a very special part of it, because God says that he created each one of us in his image. We carry the family traits of God, right? And just like in some ways I can know my Grandpa Van in little ways through the family traits that have been passed down from him to my grandma, to my dad, and to me. So we can know God through the godly characteristics he has given each one of us as his image bearers. Yes, we need to admit right up front that our sin has broken the image of God in our lives, but it hasn't wiped it clean. We still carry the family resemblance in our moral convictions, in our creativity, in our love, in our demand for justice, and also our capability for mercy and grace. We show the image of God. And so we can know him better as we see that image in each other, And as we live out that image, as we imitate him more and more in our lives. Right? So Paul invites the people of Athens. And at the same time, he is inviting you and me still today to see the pictures of God that he gives us every day. Do you see them? Are your eyes open to those pictures? Really, the question is your heart open to seeing God all around you? Or are you too busy, too distracted, maybe too disinterested in God to even pay attention to him? Here's an invitation. For one day, at least one day, make a conscious choice to notice God all around you. See the pictures of his beauty and his power and his goodness and his love in creation all around. Start with just one day. And maybe you'll want to do it more and more, to be aware of God revealing himself to you. Start there. Because if you do, you will begin to know God. Because Paul makes it clear that our God is not only a God who can be known, but he's a God who also really, really wants to be known by you and me. Right? God doesn't just kind of sit back and leave it up to us to maybe discover him or not, to hopefully catch a glimpse of him in our busy lives, but maybe not. No. God sets us up to know him. And listen again to verses 26 and 27. Paul is talking about nations and individuals, all of history and the present time, when he says that God has marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. Right? First of all, their appointed times. God has given them appointed times. Nations and individuals, including you, including me, we live at just the right time, the time that God designed for us to live. He wanted you breathing, living right now, right? He marked our appointed times. And secondly, Paul says he marks the boundaries of their lands. He moves us, he places us in just the right place by his design. So you're living at this time and in this place, whether you've been here a long time or you just arrived, you are here by God's design, not by chance. Why? Why did God do this? His goal, his purpose, Paul says in verse 27, is so that you would seek him and perhaps reach out to him and find him. This is amazing. God is arranging your life and my life to point us towards him. He's constantly placing himself in front of us, trying to catch our attention, trying to get us to recognize him and see him, trying to make sure that we will get to know him. Time and place all pointing us towards God. In other words, there are very few coincidences in your life. No, those things you think are coincidences are God working his plan to catch your attention. Right? God brought you to that sunset so that you'd see his beauty. He let you hear that thunderclap so that you would know his power. He drew your attention to that flower so that you'd know his creativity. He connected you to that special person in your life so that you get a taste of what his true love really is. And he brought you here so that you would meet him. God is not sitting back just hoping you'll find him. He's placing himself in your path. He's interrupting you with opportunities to get to know him. He's hoping you will pay attention, that you will notice, that you will get to know him. Verse 27 ends with a simple and yet profound truth. Paul says God is not far from any one of us. In other words, it isn't hard to get to know God. He isn't a mystery out there in the universe trying hard to hide from us. Oh, we can choose not to look. We can choose not to pay attention. We can choose not to see all the pictures that he gives. We can choose to ignore him and not get to know him. And many people do. But that does not change the truth about our God. Right? He scatters pictures of himself, evidence of himself all through creation. His image is seen in every person that you meet. And he is right here, close by, hoping that you will notice him. But even all that effort on his part isn't enough for God. Because God really wants you not just to know who he is, but he wants you to know him very, very personally. He wants you to be in relationship with him. Right? I can see pictures and hear stories of my great-grandfather. But unless I get to meet him in person, I'm never going to really know him, right? There's always going to be a distance that the photographs and the stories cannot bridge. And as clearly as we can see God in creation and in each other, there's still a distance that can't be bridged unless I know him personally. And God, by his awesome grace, makes that possible. God wants to be known by his people, by you and by me, so badly that he came to meet us in the person of Jesus Christ, his own Son. Right? He wrapped himself in flesh and blood. That's who Jesus is. In Jesus, God put on flesh so that we could see him and meet him, so that we could watch him and listen to him. When we look at Jesus, we see God, his character, his goodness, his love, his joy, his patience, his kindness. Right? In John chapter 14, Jesus says, anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. You want to know God, he says? You want to know God? Get to know me. We're almost to December, right? We're going to get into Advent and Christmas, and we're going to be reminded of the name that Jesus was given, of Emmanuel. Remember what that means? Emmanuel, God with us. Jesus is God with us in a very intimate and personal way, so that we might get to know him. And the Holy Spirit is alive in us still today, keeping that relationship personal. And our God is still with us, making himself known in relationship with you and me. So you and I, we can know God not only as Almighty Creator out there in the world. We can also know him. We must also know him as our friend who loves us, who saves us, who celebrates us, who walks with us every moment of every day. That's how he wants to be known by you. So our good God, our loving God, is not an unknown God as Paul saw on that altar. He is the known God for those who are willing to get to know him. So have the eyes that are open to see him. Have ears that are open to hear him. Have a heart that is open to know him and experience his love, his forgiveness, his grace, his salvation that will bring you peace, contentment, joy, all the things that we're searching for in life. Get to know the God who loves you.